Uh, Next video, 2028. Yeah, let me say this. Next video by 2028. Well, I wasn't wrong, but I assume most people did not expect this. Don't expect this consistency in the future. If you're here because either one, you're my biology teacher and have to watch this to give me a grade, or two, you clicked on this entirely because you saw that I uploaded something. If you're part of the second group, I'm sorry, you're gonna be disappointed. Let's get this over with. Also, before starting, comprehension of this video does rely on a basic understanding of genetics. I will be using big words. So, pedigrees. Fancy scientific family trees that track the inheritance of a trait from one generation to the next. I hate them. They have done nothing against me, to be completely fair, but having to create a bunch of them in class has frankly ruined them for me. Nonetheless, I have a project due Thursday, May 9th, most likely the day this video goes live, and I therefore might as well profit from it. In this video, I will summarize what a pedigree is, the meaning of the symbols on it, how inheritance works, and then at the end there will be a little surprise, so make sure to stick around. Oh, also subscribe or whatever. If you do, I might end up getting ad revenue someday, which would be nice because I hate my job. First and foremost, what is a pedigree? Good question. In essence, a pedigree is a diagram showing how a trait is inherited. I'm sure I can come up with something more complicated as a definition, but do I really want to? No. Do you want me to? Probably not. You get the idea. Now, before I go on to describe the symbolism of pedigrees, I should explain how traits are inherited. Essentially, inheritance falls into one of several broad categories. My class looked at three: autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, and sex-linked. To figure out which one a pedigree demonstrates, you can use this handy flowchart. Firstly, answer the question, who is affected? If it's roughly equal in terms of males and females, or there are otherwise male carriers, which I will get to in a moment, the pedigree is likely autosomal. If there is a bias towards men and there are no male carriers, which again in a moment, then the pedigree is likely sex-linked. If the trait in the autosomal pedigree skips generations, then it is likely autosomal recessive, and if not, likely autosomal dominant. There are more ways to tell, but those are the basics. Now, you may be wondering what autosomal and sex-linked means. Maybe not the latter, that one is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll explain anyways. Normal human cells, famously, have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs. 44 of these chromosomes are autosomes, whereas 2 are sex chromosomes. The 2 sex chromosomes determine your biological sex. If you have a Y chromosome, you are biologically male. If you lack a Y chromosome, you are biologically female. Now, I will say sex and gender are not the same thing, but now is neither the time nor place for that. The rest of your chromosomes are autosomes. They do not code for biological sex. Autosomal traits come from genes found on autosomes, whereas sex-linked traits come from genes found on sex chromosomes, mostly the X chromosome. Y'all know what a gene is, right? You should, because I'm not going over it. Sex-linked chromosomes show up predominantly in males because males have only one X chromosome. Typical males. There are like a couple conditions where biological males have more than one X chromosome. Again, not getting into that, but those do exist. There are exceptions. Sex-linked traits are commonly caused by genes found on the X chromosome, and most are recessive, meaning they will not be expressed if a dominant allele of the same trait is also found in an organism's genome. However, as males only have one X chromosome, as opposed to the 2 of females, they are much more likely to experience sex-linked recessive traits, as they only need one copy of the recessive allele for it to be expressed. Now, the symbolism of pedigrees is not super complicated, but there is a decent amount of information to remember, so pay attention. Males are squares. Females are circles. A square or circle with a diagonal line through it is dead. A colored-in person is affected with whatever trait the pedigree is tracking. A half-filled-in person is a carrier of said trait. A horizontal line between individuals means a marriage. A vertical line coming out of a horizontal line means there are children from that union. And each row of individuals is a generation listed by Roman numerals. There are other ones, but they are not important to me because I will not be docked points by not including them. Now, I've used the word carrier a lot in this video. You may be wondering, what is a carrier? A carrier is an individual that is heterozygous for a recessive trait. For example, if a person with cystic fibrosis and a person without cystic fibrosis have kids, the kids would all be carriers for cystic fibrosis, assuming the parent without the disease is not a carrier themselves. Here's a pedigree for that one, by the way. Cystic fibrosis is autosomal recessive. If you're wondering how I got the names, I pulled up the random name generator off of the internet that I use for Dungeons & Dragons. That is ultimately unimportant, but I do need to pad the runtime of this video. To define it simply, a carrier is someone who is not affected by a recessive trait, but could have children that are, depending on the child's other parent. Autosomal dominant traits are different. There are no carriers for dominant traits. If you have a dominant allele in your genome, it does not matter if you are heterozygous or homozygous, you will have the dominant trait. I will use the example of a person who is homozygous for rolling their tongue and a person who is homozygous and unable to roll their tongue. Those two have children. Tongue rolling is dominant, by the way. Because of how Mendel's law of segregation works, which is a whole other thing, all of the children will end up being heterozygous and able to roll their tongue. Here's that family going down 3 generations. What's that horizontal line right there, you ask? Don't worry, they're from West Virginia. It's normal over there. On a different topic, the Russian imperial family. Alexei Nikolaevich Romanov, last Tsarevich of the Russian Empire, son of His Majesty Emperor Nikolai II, was famously hemophilic. The boy wouldn't stop bleeding. Now, there's a stereotype of European nobility being chock full of nasty hereditary diseases, looking at you, House von Habsburg, and the Romanovs were not particularly different. They had their own fair share of problems caused by double dipping into the proverbial bowl of cheese sauce that was their gene pool. Hemophilia, however, was not one of them. There were no records of hemophilia in the Russian royal family before little Alex. By the way, this is my main source, and yet he somehow still was born with the condition. This can all be explained, however, by his mother's side of the family. Empress Alexandra Feodorovna Romanova of Hesse and by Rhine, last Empress of Russia, was born to the German noble house Hesse-Darmstadt. She was the granddaughter of the famous Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom, one of the most famous carriers of hemophilia in the world. Alexandra's older brother Friedrich suffered from hemophilia and actually ended up passing away from a brain hemorrhage after falling 20 feet out of a window at the age of 2. Had he not had hemophilia, it's said he actually might have lived. I'm not so sure about that. How is a 2-year-old expected to survive a 20-foot fall? But I digress. Alexandra, as an adult, was naturally extremely worried about having a hemophilic son, and after having 4 daughters, she birthed our little friend Alexei, who was, likely much to his parents' chagrin, hemophilic. He had inherited a Y chromosome from his father, and a hemophilic X chromosome from his mother. Through a quite dark twist of fate, the last Tsarevich did not die from his hemophilia. No, his death was much worse. He and his entire close family was executed by firing squad. He was 13. Damn commies, am I right? Anyway, this is an admittedly incomplete pedigree of Alexei Nikolaevich, tracking his hemophilia back to his great-grandmother, Her Majesty the Queen, Victoria. That is all, folks. Let me guess, you didn't click on this video expecting to learn about Imperial Russia. Yet here we are nonetheless. Wish me luck. I hope I get a good grade on this.
Bye.